I've never been one to shy away about expressing my honest feelings for Nintendo and their flagship series. I grew up a PlayStation kid, what can I say? So all of my attempts to go back and try to see what all the fuss was about has always been through a rose-tinted lens, and this is especially true for Super Mario 64. I've tried for the better part of a decade to get into the classic game, but no matter how hard I tried, how many times over the years I attempted to lose myself in the experience, I simply couldn't do it. I'd play the game for maybe an hour or so and then I'd get bored, so I'd just try again another time. And I would get bored again. And again. It just couldn't hold my interest, so because of that, I've never actually seen beyond the first floor of this castle. Until now.
It's me, Mario!
It's not like the game was difficult and I was getting stuck, rather it was difficult to keep my attention. Something about Mario and this franchise always went over my head. Yeah, the games have remained a relevant staple within the industry since their inception, given the consistent, bankable quality regardless of the system, the gimmick, or lack of any major evolution in the formula. But I didn't have access to it, so I was always trying to find my way in through a veil of opinions of the Nintendo diehards that grew up playing these games, spewing the same rhetoric that these are the greatest of all time, must play before you die, definitely top 10 best games ever, trust me dude, source Shigeru Miyamoto. It's easy for a lot of gamers to forget that the nostalgic memory of unwrapping your first Nintendo console at Christmas simply is not a universal concept for a lot of us, and I've always related to that other crowd of non-Nintendo kids, which no doubt has only hindered my ability to get in and give these games a fair go even further. So, what changed? Well, I've had some time off recently just to play some games, just for me, and tick some stuff off of my extensive backlog. You guys know how it is, right? But everything I played just failed to leave me feeling satisfied with the time that I'd spent. I don't know, just something about the games I was choosing weren't scratching that itch for me, which is when it struck me like lightning. I'm in the mood for a good old-fashioned collectathon. In case you don't remember, or if you weren't around the channel at the time, my first real Mario experience was Galaxy, when I randomly gave it a go back in 2018 for the very first time, and to say that it was my Mario awakening is an understatement. It's a game that I fell in love with instantly, singing praise like nobody's business, and I've also enjoyed plenty of the classic 2D games over the years as well, but that's such a large gap to bridge, and so coming into this game again for yet another attempt to lose myself in it, well, I was still skeptical. Let's just put it that way. Now listen, I'm not interested in 100% completion or becoming an expert speedrunner or anything like that. In fact, I'm sure you can tell by seeing some of my gameplay here that I am indeed not in any position of authority regarding this game. My primary and only goal was to see every level, beat the game, and hey, if I happen to enjoy myself in the process, well then that's the cherry on top. So fast forward, and now that I've played all the way through this game, I think for the very first time after all of these years, I think that I finally get it. So starting out, I'd like to mention that my earliest gripes with the game was always the rather basic level structure, but as the pioneer of the 3D virtual space, I've perhaps been too harsh on it over the years. Again, growing up with similar games that released later, trying to play backwards is always a recipe for poor opinions. Look, it's no Bubsy 3D, god no. In fact, many of the levels are cute, they've each got their own unique gimmicks going on. However, I never liked the way that N64 games were blocked out and textured. It really shows its age, even within the console generation it was born. But it's not bad. In fact, I'd actually say it's pretty good. What's not ideal, however, is the camera situation, as I just find it to be kind of awkward. It's not locked in place, but is often still impossible to get every angle on a situation when compared to other games from the era, a holdover from the original which sadly hasn't been modernised within this re-release. I can tolerate it in the more open areas, but as soon as we get into the later, more complex stages, it does become a lot more noticeable, especially while trying to do some very technical platforming. But thankfully, Mario has a lot of maneuverability. In fact, I think that's why this game was so impactful back in 1996. The movement tech is off the charts. Something else the Nintendo Switch version doesn't accommodate for is a game manual, but thankfully I do have a copy of the original N64 instruction booklet. I love the intro in this. Will Princess Toadstool be kidnapped again? Is there no end to the constant feuding between Mario and Bowser? Bro, this was only like the 5th game or some shit. Here's to another 50 more, for Christ's sake. Anyway, the manual details extensively Mario's moveset, from high jumps, long jumps, triple jumps, somersaults, swimming, flying, climbing, crawling, kicking, and sticking the landing. Because I'm such a hater, I've also always despised that damn disaster that was the N64 controller, but even I've got to admit that this game flows so smoothly regardless of your method of playing it. Analog control was invented for Mario 64, a modern luxury that we tend to take for granted nowadays. So, for me being such a cynical butthole, I can't deny that this was exactly what I needed to scratch that itch for a solid collectathon game. The introductory levels, while kind of lame if I'm being honest, still provide a great example of what you can expect. A star collecting journey not just limited to platforming, but the puzzle elements as well, discovering secrets hidden around each map and the castle walls serving as the hub area. This is what I love about the genre, is that sense of discovery and adventure. Nothing replicates that feeling of poking around a strange room and stumbling into a mysterious secret as your reward. I am a little disappointed that these opening levels are what they are. Good, but not great. Even playing now, I still found that oh so familiar boredom begin to creep in yet again, and I struggle to pinpoint why exactly. The game is fun, the controls are solid, and all of the little polygonal fellas are charming to dance with, especially Bowser. They really need this version as a skin in that new Mario Kart game. But for the first time ever heading downstairs into the basement, I found myself still intrigued just enough that I wanted to keep playing, and if that's what I was gonna do, then it was now or never. I was gonna take this game to the distance. And I'm glad that I did, because it was at this point where the game really begins to pick up. Man, if only I'd played for just a little bit longer all those years ago, then maybe I wouldn't have been so salty towards this game for so many years. I mean, come on, any guy who is this cute while this low poly deserves all the love in the world. Now that we're into the dusty dunes and hazy caves, levels are suddenly a lot more complex, which encourages the exploration and experimentation with your surroundings in a really natural way, as things are not always as straightforward as they may appear. We're presented with new tools completely void of direction, so it's all about experimenting, which is where the fun is and feels validating, teaching yourself a new trick. And now that we've got access to the different hats that let us turn into Metal Mario, walk through gates, or soar above them and beyond the clouds, Mario 64 goes beyond that tech demo feeling and hits the pinnacle of creative, engaging level design. I just can't get over how even a stage that appears rather simple at surface level can contain such a masterclass hidden in plain sight. And with a much larger abundance of hidden switches, doors, and encounters to be had, the game excels at drawing the player's attention. Games that do this really well are titles like Jak and Daxter, where there is just so much to do, you can easily wander off and forget what it was you were supposed to be doing before the game brings you full circle with a newfound solution. So never knowing where exactly you're going to end up or where the castle will spit you out next becomes a real thrill, and it even creates some genuinely cool moments as a result. Even just taking the time to look around can be a reward in itself, and the volume of little cryptic bits is just perfect. I mean, there are some head scratches here, but nothing that an inquisitive child couldn't solve on their own. There is just the right amount of advice available to the player at any given moment. Even within the game's manual are some subtle tips. This part here, for example, find hidden places that you can only get to using the wall kick. And there is a picture of a ghost. So you go into Big Boo's haunt, look around for a place to wall kick, which isn't overly common by the way, and there you have it, a new room to explore. While all of the levels mostly play out the same, with some repeated objectives like traversing the stage or collecting all of the red coins, along with many a fetch quest which requires you to learn your terrain, there is always something new under your feet to keep it fresh, or something not under your feet, keeping the action hot. So I found it just so easy to lose myself in, which is what I've always wanted, maybe even expected out of this game. And sure, there are still some frustrating little things. Most of that can be chalked up to its age, or perhaps my overthinking otherwise straightforward tasks. But I just love that there is always something to do. Even when you think you've seen everything a stage has to offer, we get new variations. Returning to previous stages presents new outcomes once you've accessed certain abilities, which makes for collecting the stars an absolute delight, and also adds a greater level of appreciation for those introductory locations once you begin to fully see their potential. But that does have to be another one of my gripes with this game. A minor one, yes, but a complaint nonetheless. Growing up with Spyro, for example, we're presented with endless time to explore and complete the levels, meaning that you can truly play it at your own pace. I find it rather frustrating that this game kicks you out of the level every time you collect a star. Imagine playing a Tony Hawk game and you collect all of the skate letters, you get that da 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 da, and then it kicks you back out to the title screen. You load it back up and you do one more objective, da 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 da. Oh my god, how annoying would that be? If other developers understood this, why not Nintendo? It's especially irritating while still getting adjusted to the game's structure earlier on, as there is nothing worse for me than having a puzzle half solved and then accidentally stumbling into a secret star which ends the level. Or, God forbid, having a monumental climb up through a stage only to slip because of your fat fingers, booting you back out and forcing you to do the entire thing again. I don't recall Galaxy being nearly as annoying regarding this function. I mean, sure, it was a solid decade later, but you were still forced to play one star at a time. But from what I remember, in Galaxy at least, there was a lot more variation to the different paths and challenges that each star required, so perhaps that's why I didn't mind it as much in that game. But imagine playing a level like Treetops from the first Spyro the Dragon game for the very first time, with no checkpoints and one fall off the map sending you back to the very beginning. You would not be able to figure this out efficiently. And we have levels like that in this game, which by Act 3, when they begin to show up, really started to test my patience. If the middle part is where I just really fell in love with this experience, then by the time I reached that top floor of the castle is when I really started to notice my appreciation for it waning. Alright, I want to preface everything that I'm about to say with a fact. This game never stops being good, per se. You know, on a technical level, this is still one of the all-time greats, but as a first-time player, I can tell you right now that people never mention this game's poor shortcomings. Like I said, there is nothing worse than plummeting after completing a huge climb, so Nintendo figured, hey, you've made it this far, you've earned it. Time to get punished even more because that's all you're gonna get. Rainbow Ride in particular, let me tell you, I took one look at this stage and never looked back. coming off of Tall Tall Mountain, which nearly shit me to tears, and some other stages like Snowman's Land where the game does everything in its power to hinder the experience, safe to say that I was beginning to feel kind of burnt out. Even stages like Tiny Huge Island, which has a really fun gimmick, but one that leaves a large chunk of the level being just annoying to navigate. Or another example is Wet Dry World, which in similar vein, I was impressed with the water gimmick and how it played into certain puzzles, and thankfully Mario 64 is one of the few games of this era that actually managed to get the swimming right without feeling needlessly disorienting. But man, this world really shows off what plenty of non-Nintendo guys like myself have felt over the decades, is that the graphics and art design could have been better in a major way. I do love the music on this map though. While repetitive in some areas, man, the music of Mario 64 is iconic, no doubt about that. But yeah, it was by this point that I started to have my doubts about the game, so it quickly became a mad dash to the finish line, cleaning up some of the stages I still had the tolerance for so that I could climb the staircase and take on Bowser one last time. Yeah, bet. This final gauntlet with this colour palette and the faux lighting almost makes me want to take back what I just said about the game needing some graphical improvements. But hey, with Bowser finally burned and Jack burnt out after a long night of gaming, I can't deny that while it definitely ain't perfect, I am just really glad to finally be able to check this one off of my list, as it truly is a gem, and now that I've seen it all, I can finally appreciate why it's remembered so fondly. Mario 64 excels with the experience. Discovery, problem solving, and reward are the three characteristics which serve as the character this franchise always lacked in my opinion. Mario is just a vessel for the player, and that's all he ever will be. And case in point, the DS reimagining relegating Mario to just an option among some other genuine fan favourites. But what he does accomplish is allowing us to access the adventure. The motion in this game is remarkable, something well beyond the threshold of what we see in many games to this day. While he can be a little annoying always grabbing onto stuff, making going through pipes ironically one of the toughest tasks, there is nothing else to say on the matter. I do wish that the earlier game didn't start out so safe, or that the late game didn't overdo much of the tedium and frustrating elements, but all in all, it's a damn good game, man, and so I've got to give Super Mario 64 a 7 out of 10. I can admit that my prior convictions with this game most likely stemmed from nostalgia bias. I was a PlayStation kid. But I've now matured, and thank God for that, because otherwise, I may have never got to experience fully one of the most important games of all time. However, while I did enjoy solid chunks of it, I do not see myself being one to replay it or battle through for a full completion. I feel as though I've had the experience, I finally get it, and I'm satisfied with that. Time to move on to the next game. Although, if I do ever get that itch again, then I'd definitely be interested in checking out the DS version to see how it compares. But that is for another time. So until then, thank you all so much for watching the video. I'm Square Eye Jack, and I hope you have a great fucking day. And if you want to see me react to my super old Mario 64 short review, you can find that video and a lot more exclusive content over on Patreon. Cheers, guys.